Coming up next, The Bookening reads Romeo and Juliet. Good morning, good evening, and in case I don't see you again, good night.
Just watched that movie recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have not seen that movie since it was in the theater.
It holds up.
Does it?
Yeah, it's good.
Is it still a searing indictment of our television-obsessed culture or whatever?
Sure, yeah,
whatever
we're still
on
as
earth
television obsessed as we've ever been. Social media, it's an indictment of that too.
Okay.
Watching everybody's lives through Instagram.
Does it actually feel more prophetic now?
No.
No, okay.
It feels like a prophecy that no one listened to.
That was one of those movies that was like thoughtful and
Prescient.
meaningful and prescient, and yet really mainstream. Like everybody went and saw it, and everybody thought that it was thoughtful and meaning and prescient, which sort of makes you think it must not have been
Quite as meaningful and prescient.
like,
yeah.
I never did. Yeah.
You never thought it was meaningful or prescient?
Never saw it.
Oh, you never saw it?
No.
I think one of the big
Everybody
reasons
was,
was...
I think it was because of,
You were doing a Nathan or reverse?
I think I was.
Like
I think
a,
it was like everybody is seeing this and thinks it's like super profound. So it's probably,
it's good.
I'm going to stay
And
away.
it is good.
It was Jim Carrey's first dramatic role, so I think that's what really drew people into it.
Yes. We were talking, of course, about Me, Myself, and Irene.
Yes, of course.
The
Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumberer 2.
Yeah. That movie really moves me.
Yeah, no, it is.
Tears every time I watch it.
Moves me out of the theater.
Oh.
So satisfied after
Yeah.
I've laughed for 90 minutes.
You know what did not move people out of the theater?
What's that?
Romeo and Juliet.
No, they stayed right there.
Yeah.
They were so devastated. They sat in their seats
Cried.
and cried.
I think it's a comedy.
Yeah. You guys, are we going to have like takes on Romeo and Juliet?
I got a take on
No.
Are
I
you
got
gonna-
a take.
Actually, it's a something. It's not just
Actually,
like,
it's a space opera.
yeah, it's actually a space opera. That's a good take.
That's my take.
Yep.
Good stuff. Well, listen, folks, we are talking, in case you can't tell, which maybe you can't, we're talking about Romeo and Juliet. The show is The Bookening.
Mm-hmm.
The host is Nathan Aaron Alberson.
Yep.
The first, there will not be a second, because I'm not naming any of my... I guess you could name your children Nathan Aaron Alberson the second. Is that allowed?
Good.
You could, yeah, you could do that if you wanted to.
That'd be weird, but yeah.
Yeah.
Be very
I
strange.
don't suggest it. Even if you love me, there's better ways to prove it. Face tattoos. Really just face tattoos.
Tattoos of Nathan's face.
Right. Tattoos of Nathan's face on your face.
I'll just wear your face.
Yeah. Hannibal Lecter style.
How about that?
Well, I wish we were doing our Stephen King episode because that would tie in rather nicely. I'm going to talk about somebody who wore faces in that episode, but we're not. We're talking about Romeo and Juliet.
Juliet, as she's known.
Old Juliet.
Mercutio.
Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
It's a play by William Shakespeare.
The one and only.
True.
The podcast is The Bookening.
Yep.
I am
Also
Nathan,
true.
host Nathan Aaron Alberson. No
True.
one else holds that title, but Brandon holds the title of the contextual Texan.
I do.
The ABD, PhD,
Yep.
1, 2, 3,
You and me.
you and me.
Girl.
And he's also the introducer of The Third Man.
He is the one and only.
Mm-hmm.
The Jacob. Kyle. Menso.
You need that effect.
Oh,
man.
sorry.
That's what the board's for, so you don't have to.
Whoa. Jacob, Kyle, Menzo. Woo,
There's a real audience that we have here.
Oh, let me turn off this megaphone.
Thanos is coming.
Hey, everybody.
There he goes. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyhow, that was an introduction of me, and I'm here.
Jake is here. Brandon's
check.
here. I'm here.
He's the pastor who's a master of reading.
Yes, he is. You're the scholar who's a baller of books. What's that sound? It's the contextual Texan.
It sure is.
Brandon is from Texas. He's going to provide some much needed context on Romeo and Juliet, the premier play by old Billy S.
Yeah.
I am excited to talk about this one. Actually, I have to say, I enjoy Romeo and Juliet. I think maybe I've been hankering for some lesser Shakespeare, tired of tackling all this Lear and Macbeth. And
Lear's my favorite.
yeah, it's good. It's good.
But this one's fun to talk about. This
Very
one's fun
big
to
of you
teach
to
students. Say what?
So it's very big of you to acknowledge
That
Lear's good.
there's good. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What can I say? Except you're welcome.
Da-da-da-da-da. The tattoos are dancing
The
across your arms.
modern version of William
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare today.
Yeah.
Moana?
Yeah, Moana.
Yeah,
The character
Moana.
of Moana is the modern
It's
Shakespeare.
the closest thing that we have to
you
compare
mean
to.
that? Yeah, what's his
Yeah.
face?
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
The Shakespeare of today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think today sucks, but
Yeah.
he is the Shakespeare of it. Sure,
He's our
sure, why
Shakespeare.
not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, who else would be a candidate?
I mean, you could try to make a case that Cormac McCarthy is, but he lacks the populism.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have to be another director. or
Who's that
something.
cross-dresser? Harry Styles.
Ooh, no.
Is he the
No,
Shakespeare of today?
No.
No.
We have to be someone who creates and also acts. I think that Lin-Manuel Miranda is the best option
He's
we
the
got.
closest analog we have
Yeah.
to popular genius on that kind of.
Yeah,
Yes.
sings his poems in front of the president, which would be like Shakespeare in front of the queen.
Yeah.
So yeah, the King's Players.
Mm-hmm.
The Elizabethan Lin-Manuel Miranda is actually how we should start referring to.
I think
true.
that it's actually probably pretty true because, as we've talked about many times with our Shakespeare context, the Shakespeare we think of is not probably who Shakespeare actually was. In our particular world, we have the classical kind of cold version of Shakespeare, that he's like this high art form Shakespeare. And
He's
that
a bust
Yeah.
on a
and
shelf.
the way he got there was because, I mean, even like in the 1700s, he wasn't really known as like the great bard. He eventually had to be championed by the Romantic poets and then some other people. And then finally he became known as the Shakespeare we have today. But that Shakespeare was kind of created out of this desire to have this academic, cold, high art Shakespeare. And that's definitely not who he was. And
He's
that's
a real
not even,
man of genius.
yeah, it's not even how his
Real man of genius.
real man. I don't know the reference. What is he?
It's a beer commercial.
Oh.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Bud.
Wise.
That's great. We did it.
We did it.
Wise.
Well, guys, good night. That's the show.
High
Grew
fives
up
across
in the
the
90s. What's up? I'm not even going to give that. Oh, my goodness. I wasn't going to give it energy, but you guys did. Robot voice says we must get back on track.
Wow.
Okay. All right. Well, that just
Thanks.
ruined the mood.
That really did bring down the mood.
We're like, oh no.
Thanks for the buzzkill.
Yeah.
Shakespeare.
Shakespeare. Yes.
Nothing like the high art that we imagine him today.
Right.
Like the high art that you guys just experienced.
The
with-
immortal
Yeah.
bard of Stratford upon Avon. Let's
Yeah.
talk about him.
Well, you know what?
Yes, I've also got a monster voice. What? A monster voice. Amazing. And I've got a large robot voice.
Which sounds like this. Wow. Hey guys. Well,
Let's talk about it. Well, that immortal bard. Stratford upon Avon! You gotta do the thing from an all-powerful queen! Look upon her and despair!
Oh, right. Well, that was wonderful.
I didn't even know that effect existed on the board until just now.
I thought you were trying to get us on the rails, man.
Yeah. Okay. We are on the rails.
We are. We're on them.
What rails burst through yonder window?
Oh, yeah. Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
We've talked about this guy how many years now?
Oh, is this number 7 or is
this
this
number
number
7?
6?
I have no idea.
We always forget.
Well, we were talking.
Well, how many Austen novels are there?
We just redid Pride and Prejudice.
So if we can count the Austen novels,
I always get confused about that. I think there's just 6. It's
Yeah.
Sense, Pride, Emma, Mansfield, Northanger, and Persuasion. So
you did that one, yeah.
So we are actually in the midst of year 7. This is the 7th
right.
time we've
It's
talked
our year
about
of Jubilee.
Yes, we are finally free.
We're free, as people can tell.
Free at last.
Yeah,
Free at last.
So we were talking beforehand about doing this context.
Can I just say very quickly, whichever one of you made the connection to do Kate Blanchett when I turned on?
That was me.
That was very smart. And,
That was funny
and fun. A dark queen. It really does kind of sound like that, unfortunately. All right.
Well,
anyway, Shakespeare.
We are talking about
We are Tarking.
kind of Tarking. We're Tarkington.
We are Booth Tarkington.
Booth Tarkington.
Yeah.
Fran Tarkington.
Fran Tarkington.
So many great
Ball
Tarkingtons.
player.
There's the not
Grand
Tarkington,
Moff.
but is it Talkington?
Grand
the
Moff
lawyer
Tarkington.
from Bleak House.
Yeah, that's Tarklehorn or
Turkle
Burkle, Turkey Baster.
Turkey Baster, yeah, that famous lawyer from Bleak House.
It is Tarkinghorn or something, I think.
Tulkinghorn.
Tulkinghorn, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're talking about J.R.R. Tolkien. No, we're not. We're not talking about. I really thought I was bridging us back to reality there.
We're not talking about J.R.R. Tolkien. No.
J.R.R. Tulkinghorn.
But J.R.R. Tulkinghorn liked the guy we're talking about. But who doesn't?
Yeah, who doesn't?
Shakespeare. That's who we're talking about.
Yeah.
Shakespeare.
That's a good question, actually. Who doesn't? Nabokov, maybe.
Probably.
There's like famous people that don't.
Oh, Tolstoy didn't like
Tolstoy.
him.
That's who I was trying to
Yeah,
think of.
Tolstoy did not like Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But he wasn't writing in Tolstoy's language, so.
Yeah.
And Tolstoy wasn't very good either.
Right.
So. Hot take.
Hot take.
So one of the reasons I'm excited to talk about this play is because it's a great play to teach to students. They get excited about Shakespeare. So in that vein, we've done this 7 times now, guys, and we pretty much do the same context every time. So let's do a little bit of quiz.
Okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
When was Shakespeare born?
1993.
Good job.
Still,
He's still alive.
still got it.
We got to be very careful not to invert any numbers in saying this
we're gonna get
casually, or
one
else we'll
star.
get a 1-star review.
Yes, we did. Let's see if we can actually do this.
1537.
No.
15. No, it's 14 something. Is it?
No. It's he's the right century.
Okay, 15.
17.
Is it
Is there
15?
a 7 in it?
No. You
Is
got to
it a-
keep going this way.
Is it a teen number?
No.
09.
1507.
No, he's closer to the 1600s. You guys are getting
1580 something.
nope too
15
too far,
1570 something.
57.
Too far. Too low,
58.
too low,
59.
too low,
60.
too low,
61.
low.
70.
No, too high.
65.
63.
Still too high. Oh,
64.
64. Jake got it. Jake got it.
Would I win?
High five.
Yay.
Yeah, we've obviously not paid any attention to Brandon's 6 context.
What month?
April.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I
it's
didn't
April.
know that. Yeah.
He was born April 23rd, 1564, and he died.
Scant 50.
April 23rd.
Yep. He's born and died on the same day.
Yeah, I remember that. April 23rd, I think.
I wanna say
if
he
I'm
was
not mistaken,
like 54 or
is
something.
the anniversary of Amanda and Mai's first date.
Nice.
Nice.
It may have been April 24th. It's right in that
romantic day.
pocket. Yeah.
April 25th is
It
my
had
birthday.
Nothing to do with Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to say Shakespeare
I'm going
was.
to ask right now and get that.
Yeah.
That'd
I
be
think you
worth
should figure it out.
knowing.
That
We're
right, yeah.
nailing
It's
down.
about the most important thing that we could get figured
I'm
out.
going to say Shakespeare was in his 50s. I want to say like 54.
So that would be
I can't do the math. What did we say? So 1964, or sorry, 1564 plus 54, whatever
close. You're going to be very close there.
that. Okay, but I can't.
1609.
That would be 1618 if you're right.
Okay,
A little low.
1611.
Still low.
1615,
Oh, no, it
Still
couldn't
low.
be 1611.
1616.
1616. Yeah, he died in 1616.
I'm the
They're going to
expert.
accuse him of working on the King James Bible. He's got to at least be.
In the King James era. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he mainly wrote during the reign of Queen Elizabeth, but he was a little bit with King James of Scotland as well.
Yeah.
And so, who accuses him of having written the King James Bible?
He's not having written, but of having been involved in, at least in the Psalms.
Really?
Yeah,
I never heard that one before.
Yeah, there are certain Psalms in the King James that are just they're iambic.
Yep.
They may even be iambic pentameter, but they have a very sort of Shakespearean. Look this up, and listener can look it up for yourself and see if fact check me on this. But there has been, to my recollection, some people suggesting that
Well, it makes
Shakespeare
sense. I
might have
mean-
been involved at least on the Psalms.
Yeah, because Queen Elizabeth died in 1603, so he was 13 years into King James's reign. I mean, when was the King James Bible translated?
It began in 1610.
So it would have been the last 6 years of his life.
Yeah, it's the one that people have a conspiracy theory, I guess, about is Psalm 46,
Okay,
which in the King James Bible contains the word shake and spear, I guess. So,
interesting. That's fun.
which is actually the kind of thing that he would do.
Oh, he does it in his sonnets. He has those sorts of witty references to his own name.
Yeah. Though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. And then later it says, and cutteth the spear in sunder.
Huh.
God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. It's that one.
I mean, by the 1610s, he was towards the end of his life. He retired around that time to go back to Avon upon Stratford, a very wealthy man. And this is when he took all his earnings from his success in the theater and bought up some property there and lived out the rest of his life fairly happy, and died shortly after his daughter's funeral because he drank and ate too much. So he knew how to party.
Mm.
Eat and drink, for tomorrow we die.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to say that we have Shakespeare to thank in part for it's just undeniable
For the King James Bible.
For the King James
Just
Bible.
cracking the code on
Yeah.
on the English language.
Mhm.
Like
Well, yeah, because we've talked about this before, but the Elizabethan age was like the golden era of the English language. It was coming into its own. It was coming right out of Middle English.
if it was coming into full bloom, and he is the highest expression of that, and had in his entire body of work led right up to the work of translating the Bible, then he had undeniable influence. And there's a reason why people look back and want to see his hand, and that is because they see his influence,
Yeah.
and that influence is real. So sorry to hijack.
Well, no, and at the
but-
very least, whoever did translate that psalm, even if it wasn't Shakespeare, they may have done that as an homage to Shakespeare.
I always think of, I realize this is simplistic, but Psalm 8 sounds to me so much in the King James like Hamlet's little speech about what a piece of work is man, how
Right.
infinite in faculties.
Yeah.
And then you have what is man that thou art mindful of him and all this kind of stuff.
It had to have been in
They had to at
somebody's
least, somebody
head,
was
right?
at least like thinking about that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because unlike, to go back to what we were talking about to start off, unlike today where Shakespeare is kind of remembered as these cold popular phrases that are like for the elite only, or that you study in school, and that most kids and most people don't really have any room for out unless Baz Luhrmann gets a hold of it, right?
Mhm.
And tries to popularize it. But we think of him as like classical symphony, right? That you go to the theater and you're very quiet and you're very respectful. It's almost like going to church when you go watch a Shakespeare play. It's similar to like going and seeing someone perform Bach or Beethoven.
Mm-hmm.
When even those guys, it wouldn't have been that way. Like with Mozart or with Liszt, women were throwing their undergarments up onto the stage with Liszt when he played his piano pieces. Like there's just this disconnect with the way that these artifacts that we have today were actually originally accepted.
Mm.
And so just like today, we quote Marvel movies and those sorts of things and the parlance, Shakespeare would have been a part of the parlance at that time as well.
Right.
And so it's very easy to imagine that he would have had that sort of influence, and that it would have been more than somebody wanting to be academic about quoting him, but just because he had that much influence over the vernacular. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, his genius was that he was in a period of time where the English language was blooming. It was literally blooming into what we have today. It was coming out of Middle English, which was this hodgepodge of the Germanic Anglo-Saxon influences and all that. And then also the French influences from the Norman invasion of England. I almost said America.
Mhm.
And sorry, a little bit of COVID brain here. Do people know that I had?
They do now.
They do now. Oof. So, yeah, so we have that happening. And so it's just the prime moment for Shakespeare, or as someone of Shakespeare's genius, to step in and create new words, have fun with language. And there are all sorts of words that at least people claim we have in our language today because of Shakespeare. Like he was the first to apparently put the word eye and ball together. So we now have eyeball. Somebody was eventually going to do it.
Mhm.
So, but it was, in other words, it was this prime prime time for someone to step on the stage.
Primetime Shakespeare.
Primetime Shakespeare. And create this beautiful junction of language and story. And that's what he did. And so, as we've talked about a lot on this show, we don't know a lot about who Shakespeare was. If anybody wants to go and read, I think one of the best, and maybe it's outdated now, but I think Stephen Greenblatt's book, Will in the World, is really good because Stephen Greenblatt was what we call a new historicist. If you want to know more about new historicists, you can go and listen to the episodes we did, 2 years ago or so on criticism?
Yeah.
Which were pretty good episodes.
Yeah.
But the new historicism came out of the postmodernism where people were just about reader relationship to a book. And he's like, well, let's take a step back and let's actually think about how books are historically contextualized. It's a Marxist movement as well. Let's think about the way that cultures produce texts. That's kind of what new historicism was. But one thing that I appreciate about the new historicists is that they actually think about how art is created by a group of people and a person that's related to that group of people. And so, in other words, it doesn't come out of a vacuum.
Right.
Right. So I think one of the misconceptions we have is the idea of genius is that people throw around, especially I think the classical world and things like that, this idea that genius is somehow transcendent of its culture and it taps into this great mystical conversation, right?
Yes.
So we have, I mean,
You look like you needed some affirmation.
no, I'm just, I want to make sure you guys are with me.
Yeah. Yes.
Very
You guys
much.
didn't, you didn't.
Right,
Right, Brandon.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Brandon,
you guys
keep moving.
proved so well that you listened by the earlier in your exam.
There goes Brandon after the homeschoolers again.
Yeah, I know. But we have the canon, the great conversation, and there's this idea that from Aristotle up to present, there's been this just one great dialogue between the great masters of men, and that they've all been conversing. And there is some sense to that's the reality and how things are working. But there's also an even greater sense they were products of their time and they were writing to the people that they lived among.
I think the best,
versus-
we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. I think if you want to hear some good discussions about that, listen to our episodes on Homer, because I think that's one of the most egregious examples of the place where that type of person has said, this is part of the great conversation. And if they're a Christian, they'll even find these Judeo-Christian elements in it that they think are there. And it's like, no, it's just an action story. It's just about some braggart killing all his enemies and having sex with goddesses and stuff. It's got some pretty language,
because
but there's nothing dignified or about the human experience of Homer.
Because Homer was not writing primarily to Plato. Homer was singing his poem primarily to people sitting around the fire with
right,
him.
and they want to hear about sex
entertain.
and violence.
Yeah. Just that's the way it is with any writer. They primarily want to have an audience, and that audience happens to be the ones who are alive at the same time as them. And so they want to get them to read their book. They want to get them to read their story. And with Shakespeare, it's no different. He had a fairly modest education as far as we know. There's evidence that he went to some of the schools in his town, that his dad, pretty high up in the local government. But other than that, we don't know a lot about him. There's evidence in his plays that he had some of the normal schooling of the day, that he would have had. He would have been introduced to Plutarch. He would have been introduced to some of the stories of the kings of England, because you just see this evidence in his own works and in the way that he can tie his characters, such as Hamlet or Julius Caesar, to these stories. It would have obviously, he would have had some education. Either that or he was Francis Bacon.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Those are the two options.
Those are the two options. Or what is the Earl of Oxford?
Mm-hmm.
I guess there are three options, right?
Yeah.
So
Elizabeth Browning.
yes, he was Elizabeth Browning in a time machine.
In a time machine, yeah.
That's my favorite. He's Doctor Who.
He's Doctor Who. Yeah.
Who is famously now a woman, right?
Nah, he's a black guy. I think he just changed.
Oh, well, good. He's diversified. He's going to go through all of the...
Yeah, yeah. I don't know whether he's a black guy yet. He's going to be a black guy soon if he's not.
He's just cast.
He's just cast, yeah.
Pretty sure.
So they haven't actually changed.
I don't know. I've never watched Doctor Who.
Yeah.
But I did
Oh, Jake, admit it. You're a big
huge
Who head.
Yeah.
Or whatever they call themselves. What do they call themselves?
Whoites. I don't know.
Whoites.
Whovians.
Whovians.
Who's from Whoville?
Who's from Whoville? Dr. Whoville.
Have you guys driven up to the Indy airport ever and passed by the Doctor Who store
Yes.
and wondered how in the world that store has stayed in existence? It's been there for like 3 or 4
Is it
years.
just in a cornfield?
No, it's been
like
there for longer than that.
Yeah.
Much longer than 3 or 4
Really?
years.
Yeah, but it's weird. I don't know how.
It's
It's got to be a front
on
for
the
something.
southern side of Mooresville, and you can always tell because it's got that British telephone booth sitting outside of it.
Okay.
And it's got to be the nerdiest front for some sort of laundry.
I mean, I always assume a place like that is a decrepit little hellhole where nerds play games and don't actually make any money, but they also it's like they took their mommy's basement and they made a store. It's one of those kinds of comic book stores.
its own building, and it's a fairly large building.
Yeah.
Then it's got to be an independently wealthy dude
That's
that
what
just wants to hang out and talk Doctor Who with.
I suspect that that's what it is. And if they do make money legitimately, then they make money because they have an online.
That's got to be it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe people fly through the Indianapolis airport just so they can
No,
go
it's
to
not.
the
It is not close.
Is it not close?
It's down in Mooresville.
It's
Yeah.
in Mooresville.
Okay. Maybe I haven't dropped
I mean,
it.
it's close if you think 20 minutes is close. 25 minutes is close, but this is like.
No.
But you have no reason if you flew into Indy to ever drive
It's like
past it unless
unless-
you are. It is so far south. It's actually south of Mooresville that
Yes.
you are headed to Bloomington or some other place in south central Indiana if you're going to drive by it from Indy.
Yeah. But anyways, we want to thank our sponsor today.
Yeah.
You're headed to Martinsville.
That's weird. Okay. Yeah.
It is weird.
I've never noticed that before. I'm the captain of visual observation. It's what I'm famous for.
So look for it next time.
Yeah.
Open your eyes
Open your eyes
and see.
and see.
You
Okay.
see, but you do not observe.
Yes.
So
That's a different book we're doing today.
Or I observe, but I do not see.
Mhm.
One of the two. All right. So Doctor Who.
Doctor Who
Mm-hmm.
with Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Nice. Glad we got that settled.
Was Shakespeare a Dalek?
Yes. No, Christopher Marlowe was a Dalek.
Yeah, because
Exterminate.
yeah. Maybe the Daleks exterminated Christopher Marlowe.
That's probably what happened. He was
I
a
am
spy.
such a Doctor Who fan that I have
No idea what a Dalek is.
absolutely.
They're the upside down trash can looking. They're like the bad guys of Doctor Who. I'm
Yeah, I
not.
don't even know
I'm
what
not
an
a huge.
upside-
I'm not a huge. I'm not a.
You're not a huge
fan.
Yeah.
But I know what a Dalek is.
I don't even have a picture of an upside down trash can man.
I guarantee you, if you've walked by, like if you went to that store, you would see 14 cutouts of Daleks everywhere on the windows. And
How do you spell it?
D-A. Yeah, go ahead.
LAK.
I didn't know.
Dalek.
So Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't know a whole lot about him.
DALAK.
Mm-hmm. Think so.
And we've dealt with this in prior episodes, the fact that we're not too fond of the Shakespeare wasn't
That appears
Shakespeare.
to be like a Dutch word for kidney or something.
Yeah. Doctor Who's greatest enemy is the
D-A-L-E-K, right?
Oh, E-L-E-K. Is that what it is?
I think so.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. You'll see a very imposing upside down trash can looking.
Okay, yeah, I have seen that.
Yeah, I thought you had.
It's like a metal snuffleupagus.
Yeah, exactly. The most fearsome thing in the galaxy.
What was that? Lost in Space?
Mm-hmm.
That's what it reminds me of.
Gort, whatever that.
It's about the same quality.
Yeah. We don't know a lot about Shakespeare. We're not fond of people who.
Yeah, and it was a strangely conservative ideal that gave rise to this Shakespeare isn't Shakespeare.
It's an anti-progressive, elitist idea. It's well, none of the common folk could possibly know anything, so it must have been a noble.
Yeah, and it's not a surprise that it's tied to that sort of what's his name, William Buckley, that sort of Joe
Sobran. Yeah, it's all those
Sobran,
guys.
those guys that kind of gave rise to that. And it
Founded
is
the
a
National
very
Review, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I like some of their thinking, but in particular, that is a symptom of their kind of classism.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they're all kind of downstream of your boy T.S., right?
Yeah, exactly. But it is a symptom of their classism that you have to go to like an Ivy League school in order to think.
Mm-hmm.
That you can't just be a down home boy and grow up to be a Shakespeare. And so and this is actually where someone like a Stephen Greenblatt, who is trying to contextualize and think through who was Shakespeare, what's the evidence we have for Shakespeare, I actually think that
Even the way of thinking about that is so backwards because you don't.
Yeah.
You have to recontextualize Shakespeare's London. like if you think about it, just in on this level, that Shakespeare's London was smaller than Evansville, Indiana is today.
Yep.
If your idea of Shakespeare's London is this huge metropolitan whatever, it is sort of like there's a disconnect there, because you would never think of Evansville, Indiana that way. But Evansville, Indiana is 10 times, not really 10 times, it's like 1.5 times, I think, just in terms of population, what Shakespeare's London was.
Yeah.
And that's just like some dopey mid-sized city in southern Indiana.
I mean, it literally was quite a bit like Evansville, because at the time it was a booming metropolis. A lot of economy was coming into it because of Queen Elizabeth's reign and just because of the peace that she brought when she defeated the Spanish Armada. All these things that were in, you had the new exploration of the new worlds, whatever. But yeah, there was a lot of wealth and changes in class were happening. This was kind of at the tail end of the feudal system and the rise of the merchant class. And we've talked
you
about
could
this
say
before.
that because of all of that, London would have still attracted the best minds of all of
But yeah,
England.
but here's the thing: is you had lots of money pouring in, and so people had a lot of extra income to spend on their entertainment.
Yeah.
So all it took was a savvy young storyteller to realize, I'm going to take advantage of this.
Yeah.
And the Thames, kind of like the river here, ran through it, and on the other side, the Kentucky side, is where they set up the theater, the Globe Theater, and so everybody could come. It was kind of like how people build the casinos on the rivers in Indiana.
Yeah.
That's where all the debauchery could happen. So you had your theater district, and it was, in my mind, a little bit like the Moulin Rouge area, right? You just it was seedy, and that's where people went, and you had a fun time, and like the play.
What happened there stayed there.
Yeah, like even the King Lear plays, people were yelling and screaming and having fun, and you had cross-dressers coming out on stage in between acts to do a little dance and entertaining people. It was a fun time at the theater.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I know this makes me so basic, but we've been watching Ken Burns' country music documentary because we just had a little vacation in Nashville.
I've heard that recommended.
It's fantastic. I mean, you got to put up with a lot of zoom ins and zoom outs on photographs and Ken Burnsy kind of stuff.
My parents really liked it.
I would recommend it to anybody. I mean, it's wonderful. It's like 8 hours long, but lots of great music and fun interviews and stuff. But the honky tonk bars of the 60s and 70s are what you're making, which the famous spoof of them is in Blues Brothers, where they're trying to sing and there's a kind of a fence between the cage so that people can throw their beer bottles. Apparently that's not a spoof or an exaggeration at all. That's just how it was, because people were having so much fun. And then you have poets like Willie Nelson or Merle Haggard, like these people who actually have something to say and lived experience, grew up in the Depression, grew up with nothing, and they're getting up, and it's like this almost math problem of how do you make all these people shut up and stop throwing their beer bottles? Well, you tell them the saddest story that you've ever heard, or the most fun sex romp story that you've ever heard, or you just have to entertain above the noise somehow.
And that's what Shakespeare, he unlocked this of all. So at this time, then you had the growth of this major theater area in England, and you had Thomas Kidd, you had Marlowe, you had all these great playwrights coming out of this time, and they were pointing forward to Shakespeare. And then you had Shakespeare, who kind of really unlocked it with beautiful, wonderful, engaging language and really kind of sometimes raunchy stories or really sad stories that could speak above the noise. Because you're right, the theater itself, like the Globe Theater that so he moves to London, he becomes known in this theater world. Eventually he, with another group of men, they get funded and part of the guild, the Actors Guild, and they build this theater called the Globe, and it's like the place to go. He has balcony seating for the upper class so they can be kind of away from the fray. And then down in the orchestra area, you had the stage that sticks out in between the people, and the people could actually literally put their hands on the stage. Like I think we've talked about it before, but in Julius Caesar, he talks about how he could smell the breath of the people as they were calling out for him to be Caesar. And most scholars think that that's Shakespeare kind of winking towards what it's like to be an actor at the Globe. You literally smell the people around you. They're that close to you as an actor. And that's what it would have been like to be at the Globe, and it would have been loud. And the only way to win over the crowds would have been to have a story that was worth engaging their attention for a while.
Like, not everybody is there primarily because they want your story. Some of them are there to get drunk. Some of them are there to have
And that's
sex.
why I think that, like, similar to the more successful Shakespeare in the Parks that I've been to are the ones where the actors are a little bit more over the top and they are trying to engage the audience, as opposed to like just being this cold, dead thing up there that we're all supposed to sit back with our bow ties on and watch.
Yep.
Right. Like, I remember the best one I ever went to was.
I mean, it's why Stephen King or Steven Spielberg or Lin-Manuel Miranda or whoever is the real comparison, because you have this junction of craft and ability to connect on a popular level that is just, that's what's unmatched. It's not the high genius of his crafts, of the poetry of his words or whatever else. It's all of it together in one, creating this sort of like mass effect.
Yeah. Everybody knows what Romeo and Juliet is about. It's got a hook. Nobody could tell you what the Jew of Malta is about. I mean, it's about a Jew in Malta. I think he takes revenge and bad things happen or something like that. But it's like, name a hook from another great Elizabethan playwright. Maybe you could say like, such and such a thing I remember from high school is about revenge or something.
I mean, even like in this particular play that we're talking about, Romeo and Juliet, it's one of his earlier plays. And so you can kind of see the things that are going to become really Shakespearean kind of working out here. But like the final scene is in a graveyard.
Right.
And at the end, everybody's trying to rush to get there in time. You have Friar Lawrence who's trying to get there. You have Romeo who's trying to get there, right? Everybody's, and it all converges in this final scene. It's just kind of brilliant the way he works it out.
Right.
And then he gets delayed, right? And then because of the sickness or whatever. And so it's just really, you can tell that he knows, he's figuring out plot mechanics.
Yeah.
And it works pretty well. There at the end, you feel like you're hoping, just get there. And of course he doesn't.
Right. Yeah, I think the more we've done Shakespeare over the years, the more I've learned to appreciate, or the less patience I've had with, what am I trying to say? It used to be that my go-to would be, let me find a really cinematic movie of Shakespeare. And I still think it's good to find a good performance of Shakespeare. But what I don't like is, like, me and Jake watched the Michael Fassbender version of Macbeth.
Yep.
And it's very subdued, and it tries to find sort of a real psychological through line. And to me, it actually makes the play not make sense. And then you go and watch a performance of, what's his face, Captain Picard. What is that guy's name?
Patrick
Stewart doing it, and he's acting and he's performing, and it's all just a series of sort of guitar solos, and it doesn't need to make any psychological sense, actually. It's just about performance and cutting through the noise of this, in this case, imaginary audience.
And then you take it a step farther and go watch a stage production of it and see how a good stage director plays with the audience and gets audience participation and audience involvement and the exchanges in the right places and make sure the right jokes land. And then it's like, oh yeah, okay. Shakespeare he's made to be acted. He's made to be for the stage. He's made to be like that over the top.
Yeah, is why I don't love, we're doing it as a dystopian, fascist, whatever. And I don't love, like, we're gender swapping all, but I understand why Shakespeare invites that sort of thing. And I think it can be done pretty well.
Yeah, there is a playfulness to his plays.
Yeah, it's playful. And let's remember that Hamlet wasn't dressed like an Elizabethan. Like, Shakespeare was already ripping these people out of their time and place and kind of bringing them to his time and place. So I don't really have a problem with the kind of updated, we're all using guns kind of stuff, as long as it's not stupid, like which Baz Luhrmann is, by the way. I tried to rewatch that one. Anyway, we'll get to that. But
yeah, so I think it's really important just to keep that in mind about Shakespeare, because I think that realizing that about him is a good antidote to the sort of cold codifying of him that happens with the William F. Buckley crowds, where they imagine that they're so smart, and the reason that they're so smart is because they went to a good university. So therefore, everybody who's that smart it's kind of funny because it's the same thing that then the conservatives will, today, like the Fox News people, will level at the liberals, like they're the intelligentsia, right? But they're not the ones that came up with that idea of Shakespeare, right? It seems like that should be a liberal idea, like the intellectuals. They're the ones that get to rule the lower classes because they went to Harvard.
Well, the great irony of politics today is that the liberals of today are the neoconservative fascists of yesterday. And but I guess we don't have time to talk about that on.
But anyway, I just think it's kind of funny that you have some of the conservatives who champion that view of Shakespeare, but it's a very unconservative. Well, yeah, you're right. We don't have time to tear into that. But still, when the reality is, if you look at history with genius, this idea of genius that we have today is a completely made up concept that comes from the Romantic era, where people had this idea that the genius was going to take the place of the priest. And so the geniuses become little gods because there is no God anymore. And so who do we look for divine inspiration? These geniuses that sometimes have the spark of inspiration that can maybe save us. And that's what you see today, like with your David Foster Wallace's and these, because we were talking about him earlier. But so you get this movie where people are like going on a Mecca to go see a pilgrimage to go see David Foster Wallace to try and figure him out, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're hoping that maybe his deep genius can save them, but all it ends up being is empty and he kills himself.
Right.
Have you seen the movie? What's it called?
The one with Jason Segel?
Yeah.
I don't think I did. I wanted to watch it one time, but
that's
my problem with every biopic about every celebrity, genius, artist is they always have that kind of, well, Johnny Cash, since we're in our country, he rose out of poverty and somehow he had the spark of whatever. And it's like, there is some truth to that. God does elect certain people to just have a gift. It's true. He
does, but I think it's our innate desire to look for profits. And so we're looking in the wrong places.
Yeah.
So, like Walt Whitman literally said, it's a very American idea of genius too. Walt Whitman literally said that the artists are the new priests of the world, or the poets are the new priests of the world.
Well, it gets mingled up with the Horatio Alger story, right? And it is the artists who tell that story. And so it's the artist recast as the rags to riches, up by my own bootstraps, on what merit? On my grand artistic genius.
Yeah, but so many of these stories forget the bootstraps, which is what I resent. Like you actually have to pull yourself up and do work. And instead we want to just be like, well, this person was so divinely inspired that his wife walked out on him, or Jack walked out on him one day and he said, hit the road. And then he sat down at a piano and hit the road. Jack just came flowing out of him. The muse spoke.
So with Shakespeare, we have these quartos and folios, and that's the way that we have his plays today, because the whole printing press was becoming a thing. But even then, there are different editions of his plays, and some of them were written down by people who were going in and listening, but some of them were with like actors' notes written in it and changes that were happening at the last minute. So there's evidence that even Shakespeare was recreating the pristine Shakespeare.
Wouldn't you be constantly, if you were producing these plays, wouldn't you constantly be editing them?
Yeah, of
You've
course.
done your first run, now you've got your second run.
Yeah, or you look out there and you say, the Duke of Mustard is here. Let's add something because I think he'll think this is funny.
Or he may be offended or think that this aspect is going to be... So let's cut that.
Or even more simple, that didn't get a laugh.
Exactly.
Or everybody started shuffling in their seats when they were supposed to be crying there. So
yeah, and so...
Yeah, or you come back 10 years later to do your 10th run of Romeo and Juliet, but there's been a 8-year break, and you're like, well, this just doesn't inspire me anymore.
Right.
I just want to change it. I just want it to be different.
And so what we have today is kind of like the fossil, and everybody looks at the fossil and thinks, well, that must be the way it was originally. Like it came out of Shakespeare already fossilized, right? And so that every single word is like divine inspiration. But again, this idea of genius, that the geniuses are the new gods, and that we can't touch their words. And that's not the way it was.
It's a bad comedian who sits down and writes all of his jokes and then delivers the same exact routine over and over. No comedian doesn't night to night, even if he's a big shot on a tour, night to night, try to find ways to improve his material and get more laughs and sharpen his delivery and tweak his jokes here and there, so that when you get the pristine special on Netflix or whatever at the end of it, it is the cumulative work of testing the jokes out in little private coffee shops or whatever and among friends, and then honing it on tour and trying to get the big laughs from the stage.
Well, and also I just think an audience is so so unpredictable. I mean, you can prepare for an audience, but my experience of any kind of public speaking, any kind of giving a speech, anything like that is the laughs are never quite where you think they're going to be. The reaction is never the sad part. It's just like you cannot predict the thing, the one surefire thing that you think is going to kill, that you just know, like, this is my secret weapon. Everyone, and I'm going to destroy with this. Whether it's making people laugh, cry, whatever, they're like, eh. And then some throw off thing, they remember for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Well, my biggest point of personal comparison to this actually is doing weddings. Like, you cannot, if you do a wedding at your home church, and you can count on knowing that the audience, that your congregation, that the people there at the wedding are going to be half or 2/3 the people from your congregation, that you can count on staying in your old beats and getting the right laughs and the right response and the right warmth, and those people carrying along the 1/3 or the half of the people there that are from out of town and have no context. But you pick up and you go and do a wedding in Texas, or you go do a wedding somewhere else because it's a college student or whatever. Or I did my first wedding in Evansville a couple years ago, and man, that was one of the worst experiences. Like, I love doing weddings. I really enjoy it. I tend to think I'm pretty good at weddings, but that first wedding in Evansville was like a disaster. It was like the worst experience I've ever had doing anything like that, because I just wasn't ready for how far away I would be from my target audience. I just, like, none of my jokes landed. Nobody got it. Like,
well, as you talk, I'm thinking about, I've been a best man any number of times and had to do best man speeches, and I really don't like them because, I mean, you'd think, I think I could say this without undue pride, like, you'd think I could kill with a best man speech, but it's really hard for me to calibrate. Right. Even with 70% of the people that I know, there's those 30% that I don't. And it's just like, you never know who you're actually talking to, it's like you're targeting computer. It's so hard to get it to lock on.
Well, and so much of that, like in the context of a wedding, for example, is like how many people are going to be queuing off of the mother of the groom or the mother of the bride, right? So even those people that would normally, under normal circumstances, be with you, if they're feeling any kind of tension because of other people in the room, they may not give you, like, if they would give it to you, you could carry even the mother of the bride or whatever it is that is the issue in the room. But if they're feeling that tension, so it's like, and then you think about Shakespeare, it's like, well, okay, there could be like royalty here, right? He's got to figure out how to carry the royalty and carry the crowd and pull it all together. And that crowd can change night to night.
Yep. Well, and the fascinating thing is, you just made me think about another big factor in wedding toasts and things like that, which is the room itself, the physical space, the sound system, the crappy sound system that they refuse to pay for a good one. The fact that Shakespeare was working in the particular venue that he worked in means we got a particular set of plays. They would be completely different if the room was different.
That's right. He designed a theater. Well, to be fair, he designed the theater, was involved in the designing of the theater that he wanted to write to. Right. But still, you're right. Like, it was all designed to be a very particular experience that you really can't have out of context in its fullness. You can't take it away from its time. You can't take it away from its place. You can't take it away from any of those things and have all of the elements that it was designed to have in a way that a movie.
Didn't one theater burn down and then they built the Globe, or the Globe burned down and then they built the other one? Yep. I mean, I bet you can actually, we probably don't have a way of tracking it now, but I bet you could track Shakespeare's plays changing between those two venues.
Absolutely. In the venues, you could go back and have a conversation with them about why the second one, the changes that were made and why.
Right. And he'd say things like, well, we could never do Lear at the old one, but we can do it here. Yeah. Because it is that sort of thing is that significant to that sort of performative process. Yeah.
Yeah. And it would change too, because he would go to royalties mansions and they would have masks and plays there.
Right.
Well-
and like you would have the great set designers that would come to those particular places. And so you would have different, from night to night, it would change based on where you were, who you were performing for. And so
We think about just church planning. Our church today is so far different from a year ago.
Yeah.
A year ago, we're 40 people meeting in a back room at the YMCA, and half of those people aren't here anymore.
Right.
And now we're like 100 people meeting in a gym. Everything's different. Everything's changed. The sermons have changed, and the length of the sermons have changed, and the kinds of things that you say have all changed. Everything has changed dramatically. And you wouldn't even, if you were along for the ride, there would have been places where you felt it.
Mm-hmm.
But everything changes as the people change because you're working. There's a way to do that. That is, I'm an ear tickler and a people pleaser. And there's a way to do that. That is just, no, you have to preach to the people God's given you, and you have to be taking them somewhere. But yeah, all of that's going to be
Right. Well, if you were a foolish sort of pastor who was just like,
I'm going to do the same thing no matter what the room is like, and I just have to be faithful, and that's my version of being.
then you wouldn't make it. I mean,
yeah, you wouldn't. It's just not. There's nothing pastoral about that
Right.
in the first place.
you're not actually caring for people if you're not aware of the dynamics of who and what and where
and even
when.
the pressures of time constraints. So we get going, and it's like, well, you're allowed to come in at 9, and you have to be out by noon.
Right.
yeah.
It's like, well, okay, well, everybody feels the pressure of set up and tear down and all these other things, and so the sermon has to be. You have to be aware of that in your sermon, or else you're going to lose people at a certain point because they're going to be feeling like, oh, we got to get this down and get out. And as you get in, and as your process gets down, and as you get more comfortable, and as you build relationships with people at the Y, and as the people at the Y are like, oh, we'll just get there an hour earlier, and
Right.
everything gets ironed out, and you begin to learn what you can do.
But it's also simple. Like in Evansville right now, in the gymnasium where we meet at the YMCA, there is a big, what is it, AC or something that turns on at a certain time.
At 11 on the dot, and you really want to be done.
And everybody just feels it like, oh, okay.
That's a marker.
We should be wrapping up.
Yeah.
Are they right? Nah, it's a fake news. Like, it's just a sound. Who cares? You can go a little longer, but you got to be aware of the fact at least that everybody just shuffled and thought,
There's a Pavlov's dog kind of trigger that.
oh, I'm going to be eating lunch soon because we just heard the
fan. Yeah.
the fan turn on.
It starts drooling. It's really
Well,
wet.
and we needed to be done by that time when we started because it took so long to tear down and clear out of there. It took that full hour anyway. So when we started, we felt that pressure of, oh crap, like I know that we've gone long and that everybody's going to feel pressure to work harder to get, and now our process is so ironed out. Everybody's familiar. Everybody still has to work and work pretty hard, but it can mostly get torn down in about 20 to 30 minutes. And the Y is super chill about us staying there.
Right.
And so it's just like, well, actually, none of that pressure exists anymore. But the marker that
Yeah.
says it's
little
there,
flag goes that right. You know,
it's still there.
yeah.
And you have to, and part of being pastoral in that situation is just like being aware people are going to start checking out.
Which doesn't mean you always stop. It means you regather your energy. It means you have a story that you tell right there because that always brings them back. It means any number of. It means you just amp
you
up
have
your
to signal and say, we're not done yet. I have something important left to say. So don't go anywhere and don't check out. Like
It means you
whatever
say,
you
all right,
do
one
to-
more thing, and then we'll be done. Like
Yeah.
pastors will a lot of times say things like, let me just read this verse and tell one more story and we'll go. And that makes everybody kind of, okay, cool.
We're almost there.
We're almost there.
and you don't know what things were like that at the Globe. You don't know what Big Ben chimes going off, a boat in the harbor of the Thames, like whatever it is. It's not like that.
No, but
They didn't have
it's fun to
steamboats, but you
speculate
know
though,
what-
because
I'm saying,
those
like-
things matter, and they make a big difference.
And they would have been any number, could have been any number of things like that would have factored in that we would have never ever known about, that would have never been talked about, would have never been written down.
I mean, the one thing we do know is you have a rowdy audience of different classes, and you have to keep their attention, and you have no amplification, which means everything's got to be
You don't have the perfect concert hall.
right.
It's got to pop.
It's got to pop.
Everything's gotta
Everything's got to pop. Anyway, Brandon, where were we?
I think we were pretty much
It is
done.
much more
I
like
think that
Stephen King or
Yeah.
any pulp writer, I have to, when I get to the end of this chapter, I have to leave you wanting to turn.
Raymond Chandler said, when things flag, have two guys come through the door with a gun. That's the rule of pulp writing. And I think
That's
that's
pretty true, yeah.
that's the rule of Shakespeare.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ghost, sex, something.
It's hot outside and a friend's going to kill you.
Right.
Yeah, somebody's going to die.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Is that context?
yeah, I think so, right?
I actually have a couple pieces of context that I just stumbled across in reading about or listening to some podcasts or something on Romeo and Juliet.
Well, yeah, if you have stuff on the particular play.
Yeah.
Do you have, just other than this is one of his earlier works in that.
like mid early?
Yeah, mid early. So he had done some stuff before then. His name was out there.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one of his, this is not in his, I thought his name was Bill. Bill, yeah.
Yeah, it's not out there, Shakespeare.
Yeah.
What is he, gay?
That's funny.
Hilarious. Yeah.
Good.
Hilarious stuff.
Good joke, guys.
That's deserving.
It's on me as much as anything.
It's mostly me, though.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I have two pieces of context that I stumbled across. Number one, it is Shakespeare's daughter was 13, which is Juliet's age.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
So he's probably
processing
things one way or another.
Watching out for the little Romeos.
Yeah. Well, and just the way that she's kind of impetuous and a dreamer. But those are lame things to say about Juliet. But whatever she is, it comes from Shakespeare's observation of his own daughter.
Would she have watched this?
That's a good question. I don't know.
My instinct, my gut says she would have. My gut says
she would have come to see
the way
Dad
that
at work.
the way that we describe the globe. I never think of it being a place fit for children. And but then again, a 13-year-old.
13. I mean, this is a marriageable.
Exactly.
This is a woman, basically. It's basically a woman in their society. Did kids go to the Globe Theater? Let's just see if Google tells us. They do now. We welcome all ages to our performances, and anyone under the age of 3 goes free.
Children invade Taiwan. What? Audiences teach Shakespeare. Who came to the theaters? Describe the crowd as a gang of porters and carters. Others talked of servants and apprentices spending all their spare time there. Every royalty loved watching a play. They didn't go theaters.
Did children go to the Globe Theater? This is good podcasting.
Audiences in Shakespeare's day.
I mean, we know women weren't allowed to perform on the stage, so.
I mean,
I'm
not finding anything as we're doing our research here that came across this. This is pretty fun. The original Globe was built by the theater company Shakespeare was in, the Lord Chamberlain's men, later known as the King's Men. It was erected using timbers recycled from the theater in Shoreditch, the first playhouse to put on Shakespeare's work. Their old landlord, a Mr. Allen, wouldn't say recycled. He'd prefer the word stolen. The story goes that Mr. Allen refused to renew their lease for the land the theater stood on, so the company, including Shakespeare, armed with daggers and cudgels, snuck onto Allen's land while he was away for Christmas. They took all the main timbers and stored them in a yard north of the Thames.
That's amazing.
That's fascinating.
So, Jake, you had to step out for a moment, but Brandon just read a little thing that he found, not about children in Shakespeare's, but it was about how Shakespeare stole all the materials
from the first theater because the guy wouldn't renew his lease.
So Shakespeare and his friends, armed with daggers, go and just take all the materials.
While the guy's away for Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
All the materials.
Like the timbers. They just stole all the timbers from his playhouse.
That's amazing.
What a boisterous road.
I feel like I've heard that story before, but
yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so many stories.
Yeah, there's so much Shakespeare apocrypha. Well, I don't think we're going to answer the question today of kids and Shakespeare.
Nothing I found.
Yeah.
So here's the story of it burning.
Yeah.
On June 29th, 1613, during a performance of Shakespeare's Henry VIII, some small cannons were fired with no balls inside them, but using real gunpowder. The thatched roof caught alight. The whole thing burned down in around an hour. No one was hurt, but one man's trousers caught fire. Luckily, someone close to him threw beer on the flames.
Oh, good. It really does put me in mind of all the stories of the early performances of these country guys. So, yeah, Shakespeare's daughter being 13, I think is just interesting. I think I think it helps support the case that Shakespeare's not being too malicious to Romeo well, especially not to Juliet. Like he has some sympathy for these young lovers, and especially for the girl. Like he doesn't just want to portray them as foolish. The other piece of context that I sort of boned up on for this was just the state of marriage at the time. And I was listening to a thing where the guy was saying you just have to understand Romeo and Juliet as being just downstream of the initial Reformation of Martin Luther and all these guys, because the popular idea now is that children can choose their own spouse. The father has real authority, but no lawful marriage should be opposed by parents. This is what all the great reformers said, and you could appeal to the church for this. But there's this tension because we are coming out of a more feudal sort of arranged marriage timeline, and so you feel the combustibility of Juliet's parents want her to choose, but they want her to choose the man that they've already chosen, and when she doesn't, Dad feels like he can put his foot down. But we're in a really interesting tipping point right here, where we're moving towards what do you call it? I keep wanting to say free love, but that's not right. We're moving towards what we have today. You fall in love with somebody, and
woman has a choice.
The woman has a choice. Well, and the man has a choice too. We're moving out of arranged marriages, and we're moving into, which is something that we have to thank for Luther and Calvin, and those guys were real big on
choice.
On choice, yeah.
Really?
I mean, they were big.
Yeah,
on,
you can read about any number of cases like this in Calvin's Geneva, and there are historians who've done some really great work on it, where they just simply say you just don't have the right to stand in front of a lawful marriage.
No lawful marriage should be opposed by the parents. Yeah, that's how they would put it.
Interesting. Well, good.
You can discourage, you can encourage, you can say no to an unlawful marriage, but at the end of the day, if they found each other, they love each other, and there's nothing really standing in their way.
They're responsible, competent, moral agents in the eyes of the law.
Yeah.
In the eyes of the city. Then,
in any case,
you're not keeping your daughter under lock and key.
It's kind of like, I mean, this is a bad analogy, but insofar as the sexual revolution in the 60s opened the door to all these dangers and these conflicts that come with free love, people saying, we're not going to do arranged marriages anymore. We're going to do love-based marriages and respect. That opens the door to a lot of conflicts. And I mean, I think it's right that it happened, but it still opens the door to all kinds of things.
I mean, this is one thing that you see sort of as you get older. There's just a lot of wisdom in arranged marriages where your parents actually know better what makes for a good marriage.
Statistically, they work. I mean, the divorce rate, all that kind of stuff.
There are actual really good reasons for that, but also you're not going to be arranging any marriages for your kids. That's right.
All mine.
Right.
They're all arranged.
You already got it. They were born, and you signed some contracts.
There's a degree to which good families still do this sort of thing.
Sure.
Right.
They just do it with...
But I don't think they do it much differently than they did it historically.
Yeah, we watch these movies where it's like, your father wants you to marry the... And it's like, really? You think that a father, any decent father wasn't tender to his daughter, didn't care what she thought?
All that sort of thing. So it's just like, well, we have a pretty good idea of the kind of young man that we'd like you to marry, and that would be good for you, and the kind of family that you should marry into. And
I think Juliet's father is actually a good portrait of a bad father in that he wants to give her the freedom to do it. And he's like, yeah, cool, great. And then when she does something that he doesn't like,
he blows up.
He blows up and says, no, we're going to annul the crap out of that, and you're going to marry this other guy, and you're going to do he becomes a authoritarian, but only after he's pushed. And you can imagine all kinds of situations like that were happening here and now, just as they happen to this day. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to...
Well, then the number of fathers that just don't know their daughters.
Right.
So they can imagine, oh, yeah, you can marry whoever you want, because, of course, who you want to marry is going to be who I want you to marry.
And he happens to be a rich doctor.
And his name is Paris.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then he's just like shocked and surprised because he had no clue who his daughter was.
Yep.
And to be fair, neither did she. So I like this play. I like this play a lot. I think it's fun to talk about.
Or are we getting into it?
Well, I could say the baggage plane's going over,
Yeah.
which indicates baggage check. The baggage plane. Man, these things start out as like little formulas that actually make sense and can bring along a new audience, and then they just
Deteriorate.
turn into crap. They just devolve. They crawl back into the ocean.
See the walking shark?
Yeah.
It's Shark Week.
Yeah, that thing's creepy.
What?
There's just this shark that can move on land. It's a
Oh,
land
wow.
shark.
Mhm. Yep.
Yikes.
It's called Jacob Menzel.
It's just got, I mean, it's just a shark with fins, but it will look sort of like crawl up on rock. It's
Yeah,
it's
just
no bigger than this.
right.
It's just kind of like lizard-like or like a,
Still, you don't want no land shark of any size
Oh.
coming at you.
That's terrifying.
Well, listen, the plane is going over. Planes have baggage, which indicates baggage check. Where we talk about the baggage that we bring. Jake, what baggage did you bring to Romeo and Juliet?
I read Romeo and Juliet for the first time in my freshman or sophomore year of high school, and a part of a Shakespeare unit that was a profound experience for young 14, 15-year-old Jake, in just realizing that there's a world of people out there that are actually really smart and cool and get it, man.
And now you were one of them.
And now I was one of them. Thanks, Mr. Shakespeare.
You're welcome.
And so that to me was like, reading was more of an escape up until that point for me, until Shakespeare changed it all.
You're taking your first step into a larger world.
I mean, I'd read Twain, and Twain, I think, and we've talked about this before, but Twain was maybe my first real sort of like, there can be more to the literature than an escape.
But he's a purely destructive force,
Right.
purely negative.
Right. The degree to which I sympathized with Huck in Huck Finn in 6th grade or whenever it was I read that was its own separate little isolated thing.
We
But
need to redo it. We're hopefully today going to talk about our book list for 2023. I'm just throwing it out here on the recording. I'm going to push for us to redo Huck next year. I think it's time.
It's time.
I'm for it.
Yeah.
So anyhow, the idea then of literature and the world of literature as a place not just for escape, but for growth and self-discovery and philosophy and any number of other things was sort of opened up to me. I took that first step into a larger world at that point. So I credit that little unit with getting me to where I am today as the third wheel on this show.
There you go.
But no other history really with Romeo and Juliet except that. Yeah.
Hey, the third wheel on the show is still on this show. Better to be a secretary in Rivendell than a king in Mordor. You know what I mean?
Something like that. Yeah.
Guess, yeah.
No, Jake, you're not the third wheel.
You're
Really.
not the third wheel.
It's either
Jake.
me or Brandon.
It's me.
I know it's not Brandon. Brandon, what baggage do you bring to this?
Well,
The baggage plane, guys.
The baggage plane.
Yeah, there goes the baggage
Made
plane
another
again.
pass.
It's a state of
Baggage
the past. I hope it doesn't start strafing us.
He's dead, right?
He's dead. I think he's dead.
We shot
There's a
him.
crop duster that flows close. That
The flow's close.
Whoa.
that flies close.
That crop duster flows close, man.
There's a cornfield not too far from my house, and they have a crop duster come flying through.
You think of Cary Grant every time.
I do. It's a yellow, and the dude loves to just be daring and ridiculous. And
Yeah.
those guys are.
It's apparently
They
a
all
pretty
have-
dangerous job.
It's one of the most dangerous. They all have death wishes, I think. But anyhow,
Your baggage, Brandon.
My baggage. This was one of Shakespeare's plays that I actually avoided for a long time because it seemed like it was overdone and
you so bougie.
yeah, it was so bougie.
Mm-hmm.
No, you too.
Me, I'm bougie.
Bougie.
Yeah, that's right.
Bougie Brandon.
Bougie Brandon. We got
I
a new
love
name.
how that it just. Oh man, that word.
Bougie.
Yeah, it drives me nuts.
A word
Bougie.
that only bougie people would use.
I mean, well, and
bougie.
it gets like it's
Bougie
the
thyself.
opposite now, right?
Yeah.
It's so stupid.
Yeah.
I was walking through at a high school open house
just the
and
other day.
like literally
Somebody said
last
bougie?
night. some kid was talking about they were talking about how this or that was bougie.
No, young sir, no.
Did you say that?
No.
Yeah. Did you
No,
slap him?
I thought about it. But it's a girl.
If it had been a boy, then I'd say,
Slap him.
horsewhip him if you have a horse.
Whip him with the horse?
Yeah, with him with a horse. That's a Groucho Marx joke. I'd like to give credit where credit is due. I'd horsewhip you if I had a horse. Man. Okay. So you never read this one because you were too good for it.
Because I was too bougie.
You're too bougie.
Yeah, and too boozy.
Bougie to usually.
Yeah. But I finally taught it to some high school AP students, and it's great.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fun play. I think he uses it and subverts some things, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a chance to talk about all that. I feel similar to you, to Brandon, in that I never got, I'm trying to think of a good analogy for this. It's like there's certain things in life that you have to experience metatextually or secondhand, or it's like you can't just come to it innocent. You have to come to it with someone saying, well, it's not really this, it's actually that, or don't just take this as a simple love story. It's actually, Romeo and Juliet is just such a famous, iconic story that it's hard to just read it as a straight story. You're going to have a teacher or somebody say, well, actually it's this, or actually it's that, or
Everybody has to have a take.
right. Everybody has to have a take. That's why I immediately pushed back on Jake saying, well, whatever you
It's
think.
a comedy.
Yeah, it's a comedy. You're really whatever, whoever's the whatever. And I'm sure Brandon had a take when he taught his students, because you can't not have a take. I'm not really a hater of a take hater.
Take Hater Nathan.
Yeah.
Bougie Brandon.
One
Hater
take
Nathan.
over the line. I just, it's one of those things that you can't experience pure. I mean, it's really hard to get a pure experience of Romeo and Juliet, I don't think. I mean, maybe of like all literature. I mean, name something that's harder to experience in just a pure, naive, I'm coming to this fresh, I don't know what it's about. Everybody knows who Romeo and Juliet are and what happens. And everybody kind of has feelings about young love or
I mean, it's a metaphor.
yeah.
Oh, they're Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, it's Romeo and Juliet over there. Oh, he thinks he's Romeo. She thinks she's Juliet. All this stuff and the balcony scene, and it's really hard to plug into this in a way that you can actually, I think, with other like Macbeth. You may know what it's about, but it's so dense and complex and interesting that you have to read it for yourself. And Romeo and Juliet's just not like that. So I feel like I appreciate it more now. I think I'm able to shed expectations and shed takes. And I watched a version of it, like a filmed play of it. And it was just fun. It's just a good story. But it was hard to approach it. I mean, the other thing is everybody has feelings about love. And especially if you're someone who doesn't have it, which I was in high school, you think it's stupid and you want to be above it. And you want to say that young lovers are dumb and people falling in love are dumb. And if you're a conservative Christian, you want to say like, well, actually, we need to be godly in the spouse that we choose. And it can't all just be about emotions. And Titanic was stupid and all this stuff. And so it's just really hard to approach Romeo and Juliet and take its characters at face value and kind of just enter into it. And maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. We'll talk about it. But I think...
Well, it is interesting that he has any number of characters that play sideways to the romance and come along and let the air out of the bubble and are always sort of like mocking Romeo or whatever.
Well, maybe we should just move into the big picture. That's the sound of the camera shutter. Bigly bringing us into the part where we talk about the big picture of this play. So maybe we should just answer the question. I mean, what do you guys think that this play is or is about, or like what is your take on old R and J?
It's rightly categorized as a tragedy.
Categorized as a tragedize.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's in any case, like even if you want to say that the whole point is, man, they were really foolish and out of sorts, and mom and dad on both sides screwed it all up. At the end of the day, they died.
Right. Yeah. Which sucks.
And that sucks. And they're two young kids that got caught up together and caught in the star-crossed lovers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you can say that their romance was a silly juvenile joke, But the fact is, young love often has high drama, and it doesn't, when you're in it, feel as stupid as it is. And at the end of the day, they all died.
Well, yeah, I think that maybe is what I was trying to get at with my baggage is I'm finally at a place in my life. It's like you long for young love. You have your own juvenile young love. You have your high drama in your life, and you feel the stupidity and the immaturity of it if you do have any actual sense. And so you kind of push against that and you become cynical about it and you try and grow past it, which you should. But at a certain point, it's nice to get old enough that you can kind of look back on all that with some equanimity and say, yeah, of course I fell in love. My hormones were high. She was pretty. Like, it happens. Everybody goes through it. It's a thing. And
it felt like that. And
it's not just to be despised. I mean, God obviously designed human creatures to do this thing where we become obsessed with each other for a short time and then we get married and it cools off a little bit, but it is part of the process. Like it's part of the whole darn human experience, and it doesn't need to be looked down on just because we all need to eventually grow past it. It is a stage, and when done properly, a legitimate one. And when done improperly, of course, it leads to the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet. But it's not like Shakespeare doesn't know that.
Yep.
And I think knowing that his daughter was 13, which I knew, I think before I watched it this time, really helped. Because I think he's just saying, yeah, this is what happens and it's sad and maybe don't be stupid like she was, kid, but I get it. Yeah. I get it. It felt more paternal and sympathetic this time.
Well, yeah, because you have the paternal figures throughout the story. So you have the nursemaid, then you have, she's maternal.
Right.
But then you also have her parents and her dad's not the greatest. Mm-hmm. He's jocular and silly until he needs to be angry and abusive.
Right.
And then, but the real father figure and probably the tragic figure of the story is Father Lawrence.
Right.
Because
he tries to split the difference and
because
fails.
He actually, he sees, his opening speech is about how things in nature have poisoning goodness in them. And like even something bad can be good at times, but a good thing, too much of a good thing or a good thing put to the wrong use can also be bad. Mm-hmm. That's like his opening speech. Isn't that kind of what he says?
Yeah,
right?
I think so. Yeah.
And then he's the one that is warning Romeo of his fickle nature at the beginning. Like, what happened to Rosalind? Like, weren't you just in love with her?
Yeah.
And then women fail when there is no strength in men.
Right.
Like, that's one of his famous lines. And so he's got all this wisdom, but in the end, he doesn't do anything with it, and he helps them.
But anybody who's like I've done a lot of youth group work in my time. Anybody who works with kids that age knows, like, you can't just crush them. You can't just say, well, it's stupid that you're in love.
Yeah.
You got to find a way to bring them along and to channel some of that energy, some of that erotic or sexual energy even. You've got to find a way not just to stop it, not just to say, well, you're not allowed to be a human being because you're not wise enough to be a human being yet. You have to help them. So I sympathize with Friar Lawrence, not just saying,
the sexual energy of young men and young women always needs to be channeled and directed. It will find its way out.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just that is the difficulty of working with teenagers and young people is how do you channel and direct all of that sexual energy in a way that's productive and helpful and useful? Well, young men, you have to direct them to figuring out how to be in a position to get married. Right. And it all has to be pushed in that direction.
Yep. And
not at trying to have the benefits of marriage too early, and not in finding other outlets whether for that energy in porn or unproductive things that feel like success, like video games or whatever, but actually driving themselves forward. But that sexual energy is real, and parents often like to pretend their kids are still innocent,
right?
And that's not there.
Well, we actually have a false dichotomy where we say knowledge of the world is the opposite of innocent. And it's like, there is actually a wisdom that's innocent that you can strive for, at least, even through the horrors of puberty. But yeah, I mean, you imagine a society where people actually do get married young, and you imagine Friar Lawrence trying to juggle all these balls, having all this political pressure on him, trying to stand outside of it, bring some godly perspective. And it's like, I think you're right, Brandon. He is the real tragic figure because he's the only one that has agency, and the two young lovers are just swept up in their love and going to do what they're going to do. Once they're sort of wound up and released, they're just going to keep moving forward until they die or consummate. And Friar Lawrence is the one who's smart enough and above it all to potentially make things work.
Yeah, and he fails in the end.
And he fails. Yeah,
and some of it's circumstance, like he gets that plague.
Right.
He visited by somebody who has the plague, and so then he has to go into quarantine.
Right.
And so he can't get there in time to stop what's happening. But by that point, he had already helped them get into the situation in the first place.
He moves really fast, and
and so he had the strength to be a good counselor at the beginning, but then when actually faced with having to say a hard no and stop it, he doesn't do it until it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. So what does anybody else? What's your do you have a big take on Rome? Like where do you lead your students with Romeo and Juliet?
Well, that's kind of the direction we try to. So we look at in theater, what are the different roles that characters can play, and the two obvious candidates for the tragic hero in the story are Juliet and Father Lawrence. Mm-hmm. Juliet but Juliet also seems to be a little bit less of an actor in the story, right? She's acted upon,
right?
But she doesn't listen to her parents. She doesn't listen to good counsel. She does what she wants, and in the end, she's destroyed,
right?
And then the other thing that students always find really fascinating is if you look at the actions of each person, right? You think about who are the classic villains in a Shakespeare story, and how do their actions lead to them being villainous? Mm-hmm. The candidate for villain in the story is actually Romeo.
The person who comes in, manipulates everything, sows discord, and gets everyone killed.
And they find that fascinating too. Mm-hmm. And I think that for the young men, the point always is that, listen, if you don't use your energies in the right way and you refuse to listen to good counsel and you just pursue whatever pretty face you want to because you have no self-control, then you are a villain.
Right.
And I think Shakespeare is making that point to some extent, right? That if young men don't want to have self-control and don't want to listen to older men who are trying to give them counsel, then they do turn themselves
or even their friends to a degree, because Romeo's friends are like,
and there's an effeminacy and a softness to not controlling yourself there, which Father Lawrence tells him.
And they point it out.
Yeah, and so Juliet really is, yes, in her own way, she allows herself to not listen to her father, even though her father may not be worth listening to, but still, and that's his fault.
Right.
But it's still her fault too, right? She allows herself to be wooed. She tries to slow things down, right? But in the end, Romeo wins. Mm-hmm. And it's because of his strong lusts and his inability to control himself.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess that ushers us pretty conveniently into... No! Baggage again. We have to give our baggage all over again. Or that plane could be pulling us into the Hall of Heroes. Welcome to the Hall of Heroes, guys. The place where we talk about the heroes and decide if they measure up. So is that the definitive Bookening take that Romeo is... I guess I could also usher us into...
Villain's Lair.
The Villain's Lair. We can do both at the same time.
Nice.
That's really disconcerting.
That is really...
It's the Hall of Heroes and the
really
Villain's
strange.
Lair at the same time. So we are here to decide where Romeo belongs and how much sympathy... I do feel like Shakespeare, and maybe this is just me sort of back reading into it, the fact that I know his daughter was 13, but I do feel like he has more sympathy for Juliet than he has for Romeo.
Yeah.
I feel like she's given... maybe it's just because she's the girl, but she's given more vulnerability, more... It's just... The play regards her more kindly.
She's more level-headed at the beginning, too. Right?
She doesn't have a cadre of buffoonish friends that are like peeking under the skirts of the the nurse lady and being weirdos. Romeo has the problematic early relationship with Rosalind that you have to deal with. Like, is Juliet really just another in he's just in love with love, he's a classic teenage boy, narcissist, emo kind of. Romeo has all that, and Juliet's just like swept off her feet in a dumb way.
Yeah. But he has to slowly break away at her, right? Mm-hmm. He's the one that, as soon as he sees her, forgets the other girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she actually has more.
He's gone to the whole party
just to see Rosalind.
just to see her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead he sees her.
There's Juliet. And now...
Like, forget about her.
We've just traded obsessions.
But to be fair, I mean, he comes up and talks to her, and they go into that weird thing about worship and like this whole religious metaphor. And Juliet's not playing too hard to get there.
No. Yeah. She's not. But I do think she doesn't just throw herself in the same way, right? She has to be wooed.
Right.
And
like for 2 seconds.
Yeah, for 2 seconds.
Yeah. I take your point. I'm not arguing with it. I'm just saying.
But yeah.
Well, and then she sort of says when he surprises her on the balcony, she's like, "Oh crap, you heard me say how much I like you. So, oh darn, I guess we just have to move to the stage where we're in love and skip all the part where I play hard to get because you discovered my secret."
Yeah.
Oh crap.
There's some pretty telling stuff in that scene.
Yeah, the balcony scene is pretty good.
Yeah.
I like that scene.
Let's see. Capulet's orchard. She speaks. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, let me see if I can find what I'm thinking of. It is too rash, too unadvised, too sudden, too like the lightning, which doth cease to be ere one can say it light and sweet good night. This bud of love by summer's ripening breath may prove a beauteous flower when next we meet. And then Romeo, "Oh, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied?" And then she says, "What satisfaction canst thou have tonight?" Yeah. And so she's she knows that he's pushing things too fast. Mm-hmm. And yet he's just going to keep pushing.
Also, though, if I was
She's encouraging it.
Yeah, if some chick said to me, like, "What satisfaction can you have tonight, bud?"
Yeah.
That's an invitation.
Yeah.
You're like,
she's playing the game.
Yeah, well, let me count the... Yeah, she's playing the game. Well, and they both have this elaborate quasi-religious metaphor that they keep coming back to. Yeah. He is her idol, or she's her idol, or if she's a god, then she should kiss him and all this.
Well, a lot of the language that he uses is the same thing you see in Shakespeare's sonnets, which is really interesting. Like the sort of worship of the beloved and this idolization of the beloved. So
the stage adaptation that I watched played Romeo as a poet. So often when he would, spout the lines that are most poetic, or like he would kind of like pull out his
like he had a little notebook
and he'd be reading them, delivering them.
Huh. That's an interesting way.
When he's like soliloquizing about love or whatever, he's like reading or like talking to Benvolio or whoever.
Usually I feel like he's played as he's just so in love with love. He's Ewan McGregor in Moulin Rouge. He's just like, I wanted to be in love, but the problem was I'd never been in love.
And I think Shakespeare's probably doing some wink and nod at like a criticism of poetry there. Mm-hmm. So good for him.
Yeah, interesting. So how sincere is Shakespeare in terms of wanting, are we supposed to be swept up into this romance? I guess that's the...
I think if he didn't have characters like Friar Lawrence in there, then yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think the fact that he's there, and given some of Romeo's friends and just what he gets wrapped up in, I think that, we're supposed to look at this with a little bit of distance.
I can't stand Romeo's friend. I guess this actually brings us into the crawl way of secondary characters.
Ooh, my favorite spot.
Yeah, Brandon's favorite spot. I hope we don't get stuck here. I really check out when Mercutio goes on one of his long...
Oh, Mercutio bothers me.
It's like, shut up, dude. Yeah. Nobody cares about your stupid little big thing about the goddess that's asleep, or what is it? What is it even? I don't even
something
remember.
Like that. Yeah,
it's just like this big long thing about dreams or something like.
Yeah,
that part's terrible.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks.
It really is and they try to I watched a couple different stage adaptations of that in particular because the one that I watched, that actor is really hamming it up, and it's like he's trying to sell material that is just like
Well, and it's like we said earlier, it must have worked. The audience
kept
must have
it
thought
in,
it was
yeah.
funny but I just do not know how to allow for that, how to translate it into now. Like what I guess it's funny. Is Mercutio a funny character?
He's supposed to be funny. I think
everything I saw was trying to lean into the comedy of it.
Yeah, like
I think he's supposed to. It's like if you're watching a college movie, he's like that frat bro friend
Yeah.
who has a little bit of wit to him as well.
The version I saw, they made him a girl. Actually,
Yeah.
she was this kind of trans girl, kind of butch haircut. Just
He'd be played by that. You ever seen the movie Crash?
Yeah.
The one that everybody hates.
the one that
Academy Award winning one.
not the one.
The guy
about-
who plays
yeah.
the cop who's really mean, but then becomes good at the end.
Yeah,
That actor.
that guy.
He'd be
Yeah.
played by that guy.
Yeah.
Kind of the guy you love to hate.
Mm-hmm.
And I never have liked those kind of characters.
So we're saying Stifler.
Stifler kind of, yeah. I
should've-
don't. Yeah, and I've never really enjoyed those
You never really.
kind of
Because
movies.
we've all watched American Pie.
Yeah.
It's a reference from a certain time in our lives that people our age get. So,
Yeah.
Sorry.
I get it. No need to apologize. I get it.
I actually
get it, yeah.
don't know that I have watched an American Pie movie. I think I watched one of them on TV when I was that
Saw them
age.
in the theaters.
Yeah. Well,
Nice.
I can't say that I didn't see things in the theaters too. Good movies, in my case. No, I saw. Anyway, we're not here to litigate American Pie. It's
Something
bad.
about Mary.
Something about your first
We're
slice.
not here to
of
litigate
American
pie.
Yeah, no.
Coconut pie is pretty good, though.
I'm a
Not this pie.
yeah. Bye Miss American Pie.
Bye, Miss American Pie.
Mercutio sucks. I guess he's supposed to be funny.
Yeah, he's supposed to be. He's not one of Shakespeare's more successful characters.
He must have been at the time.
He must have been. They
Doesn't
were probably-
translate across the ages as well as other characters.
Well,
We'll
he
say
also
that
just
much.
makes you hate Romeo. Like, why are you hanging out with
Yeah,
these
and-
dudes?
And,
Bro?
this is really this is a fun play to teach to high schoolers because you do get to point out that look, it's like stuff I talk about with my children. Your friends, they matter. Like the kind of friends you have. People make assumptions about your character based on the people you hang out with.
Right.
Right. And Romeo might want to be this wonderful hero because Father Lawrence obviously sees something in Romeo, right?
Yeah, it seems like
He
he's
takes more of
kind
an interest in Romeo than he does in these other guys, right? And Friar Lawrence seems to be, I keep calling him either father or friar, but who cares? He seems to, yeah, there's something about Romeo that Friar Lawrence wants to help direct,
Right.
right? Which is why I made the Star Wars analogy earlier, right? But he hangs out with, instead of choosing Lawrence, he chooses Darth Sidious over there, Mercutio, and everything falls apart.
Everything falls apart. Although he does hide in a tree when all his posse is looking for him.
Yeah, that's true.
So
It's real funny.
it's good stuff.
Hey, bro, where you at,
Hey,
bro?
where you at, Romeo?
More like Bromeo, right?
Yeah, I don't like Bromeo. I don't like his Bromeo posse.
Yeah.
I especially don't like the scene where they're like, let's behave rather badly to this nurse lady. I mean, the nurse is annoying. She's another annoying character, but you at least understand where she's coming from and and whether you think she's funny or not, you can see why they thought she was funny. Like you can do the math. Like she keeps interrupting and wants to tell her own stories
Yeah,
about.
it's fun to make fun of the lower classes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you get all those
Stupid
weird
loudmouths that won't
'cause
stop
you,
talking.
Yeah, you get those scenes before
You
the
idiots
parties.
in the audience who won't stop talking
Yeah.
while we're making fun of you right now
Right.
with this joke.
Yeah. It's like the scenes before the parties where you have all the staff
Yeah.
talking and their low British accents
Right.
and all this.
Yeah. You're Downton Abbey kind of.
Yeah. So-
What are they doing in the kitchen kind of thing.
It adds a little bit of levity to the tale.
It does add a little bit of levity to the tale.
You like that, Nathan? Oh, man. I'm the third wheel here. I'm out.
Frailty, thy name is Brand.
That's a little levity to the tale. Where are we? Any other secondary characters we want to talk about while we're here in the crawlway?
Let's talk about old Tybalt.
Old Tybalt.
Just 'cause he has a fun name.
Yeah. I always forget which one he is. Is he Juliet's brother or cousin?
Or cousin.
He's for her team and he
Yeah.
dies. Does Romeo kill Tybalt?
He does.
Yeah. And
He's the one that causes everything to start spinning out of control.
Right.
Because they were close growing up and he kills him. And, are they going to survive this? Old Tybalt sure didn't.
No, he didn't. No, very few people did. I like that Prince. He comes in. He's like, "You guys need to stop fighting, or I'll kill you all." He's a pretty great character.
That is fun. And he gets the last word, too.
Yeah, Shakespeare always gives the last word to those guys, and I'm like, why?
Because they existed in the audience.
Yes, well, yeah, I understand. We all are part of the great chain of being, and that's what we believe. And the king is the dude, and the
king
prince
needs to come and give his stamp of.
But it's like, can't the king be a character instead of just having this Lord Buckington show up at the end to say, "And here is the moral of the story"? It's not my favorite.
No more tale of woe than this of all Romeo.
That of Juliet
And all. And her Romeo.
yes.
We'll get it.
Well, speaking of Romeo and Juliet, that's
Yeah.
what we will continue to do as we go into twists and turns.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
That's a twist and turn. I mean, it's a fun scene. It's all hot outside, right? And it's really playing up on this idea of how the weather affects our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that scene would work quite as well if it was like in the middle of winter. Everybody's outside and they're mad that it's hot.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tybalt comes up and Romeo kills him.
We've all been there.
Because it's hot. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, Tybalt killed Mercutio.
Yeah.
I get them confused.
And so, and that might be the scene where that happens. But yeah, and it's a good analogy for the heat within us and not being able to control our passions. And so that idea is all over this play, right?
Yeah.
Burning lust
Yeah.
and burning anger. And
Is it?
Maybe. Is it?
Yeah, I never made that connection before. Like,
And did you know they add some of the secondary characters to provide some levity to the tale?
I'm glad it provided levity.
I'm going to shut up now, guys.
The tale really
The tale.
needs some levity.
Yeah.
Some levity to the tale.
Brandon's tale needs some levity. It's a little heavy.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was funny.
Eeyore needed a tail.
You did.
His tail didn't have much levity.
But if they had put a giant balloon on his tail, then they would have had some levity.
Yeah, I'm not convinced they didn't. So twists and turns. This play is full of them.
Sure.
Oh, we ran Brandon out.
This is the most compressed story, I think, since Star Wars, A New Hope. I think, in terms of like, I met Obi-Wan. He's my best friend and father figure. Oh, he's dead. I'm really sad. Oh, I got one.
Yeah.
The most compressed story since Star Wars.
Yeah. This is Shakespeare downstream of Star Wars.
It's going to go on the back of the next edition of Romeo and Juliet. The most compressed story since Star Wars. Nathan
That'll
Alberson
be
of
on the
Bookening.
front cover.
Yeah.
Wow, the most compressed story since Star Wars. Sign me up. Yeah. I don't know. It's just everything happens really fast.
It does.
They fall in love.
It happens fast, and yet it's fun to watch him put the pieces together.
Yeah.
Right? Because it does all come to a head at that fifth act really well, where you see all the various chains. So that's another thing that's great about this play to show students is how a good storyteller will have all these little chains in their tale, and they'll all come to a head right at the end together at the same time, right? And so, students will inevitably draw like comparisons to Marvel, how you have all those various storylines, but they all have to end up at the battle with Thanos at the end. You're like, yeah, that's kind of what's going on here.
Yeah, a better populist comparison would be Harry Potter because she's good at those
but all those things have to come to a head at Hogwarts there at the end.
Yeah.
They all have to somehow appear on the same stage at the very end.
Yeah.
And
Mrs. Weasley's going to kill what's-her-face.
Yeah. And he does it pretty well, and he provides believable delays in front of characters who need to get there in time so that it all can kind of fall apart in the right, satisfying way.
I mean, I would say if I dared criticize that I prefer plot hurdles that come out of character to plot hurdles that come out of circumstance. Like, it's better if there's a people reason that Romeo can't make it back or that the letter doesn't get delivered, as opposed to I was sick or the ship got delayed. But on the other hand, it has that nice kind of old school tragedy. Like, everything would have worked if stupid postman didn't screw everything up. So maybe I like it. I don't know. Maybe I like it.
Maybe you like it.
Put that on the front of...
That can go on the front. Maybe I like it. Nathan Alberson, the Bookening.
The most compressed thing since the original Star Wars.
Some characters provide some levity to the tale. Brandon Chastain.
And Jake's only said smart things. So that's good. Guys.
Or at least my dumb things were dumb enough to be forgotten. Or simply haven't risen to the level of stupidity that's yours.
Right. We rise below stupidity here on the Bookening. And speaking of below stupidity or above stupidity, we're going into the Salon of Style, guys, where we while away the hour discussing the power of prose.
Yeah, I think this is where we've gone off the
Did you
rails
write
in the
that
past.
yourself?
Yeah, I did.
While away the hour discussing the power of prose.
That's amazing. I love that, Nathan.
Prose by any other name? Sorry,
Prose by any other
Just
name.
look up for the crickets here.
You could while away the hours consulting with the flowers. If you only had a
Brain?
yeah.
Is that actually a lyric?
No,
No, okay.
it's something like that though.
Nice.
I didn't know what
I
that.
don't think he consults with flowers though.
I would while away the hours consulting with the flowers.
If I only had a brain. Da, 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 da.
Life would be so merry. I would be a bowl of cherry if I only had a brain. All right. Salon of Style.
Yeah.
That Shakespeare's pretty good with words, huh?
He is.
He's got a nice style, that
He
guy.
does. In the past, I think we've tried to really talk about style more than we can with Shakespeare. It's one of those things that, it's Shakespeare.
It's ineffable.
It's style. Go read him and figure out what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
He whiles away the hours conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain.
Consulting with the rain. Okay.
Do-do-do-do-do-do.
Well, it's just the eternal question of why, when you put these words together in this order, do they mean so much and you change the order just a little bit, or what did old
A rose wouldn't be as sweet if it had any other name.
Exactly. Juliet's wrong. What did Samuel L. Clemens said? The difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. It's true.
Lightning bugs are pretty great.
Yeah. we're aiming for lightning bug, obviously.
Sometimes we just get lightning.
Sometimes we just get boring lightning.
Old lightning.
Never strikes twice.
Nope.
Sometimes it strikes twice.
The Shakespeare Strikes Back.
The Bride of Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Shakespeare and Robin.
Shakespeare and Robin.
Yep. Shakespeare and Robin walking through the forest. Oodle-lolly, golly, what a day. How many steps of stream of consciousness was that?
I count at least 7.
At least 7. Yeah, well, it's the step of consciousness of
for you.
That was only 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so Shakespeare has a good style. I like it.
Hey, he built the Globe Theater and they all came.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And that gets us back to Star Wars.
Kevin Costner.
With Darth Vader.
Yeah. Don't waste your love on somebody who doesn't value it.
What?
Goodreads has that as the 4th most popular quote from Romeo and Juliet.
Wait, that's not a quote from Romeo. It's like a...
Number 1 is, these violent delights have violent ends, and in their triumph die like fire and powder, which as they kiss consume, which I think is pretty great. And then, my bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep, the more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite. And then the 3rd actually is, don't waste your love on somebody who doesn't value it.
That can't be in the play.
I sense a little no fear Shakespeare, perhaps. Or,
Yeah. Don't waste your love on someone who doesn't value it.
Parting is such sweet sorry. Such sweet sorry. Sorry.
Oh, boy.
Did my
Educating
heart
Nathan.
love till now? Forswear it. Sight. What's that?
Said educating Nathan.
Hey,
Still learning how to read.
Let me see how many of these quotes you guys can finish.
Oh.
For never was a story of more woe than this of...
Our Juliet and her Romeo.
Not R, you got it wrong. And
No. Juliet and her Romeo.
do not swear by the moon, for...
She's false and wrong.
She's false and wrong. No, she changes constantly. Do you bite your...
Tongue at me, sir.
thumb. I'm sorry.
Did I say tongue?
Yes, you did. Do you
Ouch.
Ouch, you must be in a lot of pain.
Man.
What's in a name? That which we call a rose.
By any other
Name.
So far, so good?
would be just as
Nope.
Would be as sweet.
Nope.
Would not be as sweet.
Nope.
Would be lovely. and
Nope.
sweet.
What do we do with sweet things?
smell.
Smell.
So it would smell as
sweet.
sweet.
We eat them.
If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle fine is this: my lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth that rough touch with
Thy lips. Your
Ruddy lips.
a tender kiss.
A tender kiss. Oh, okay. Well, it's going real well. Keep going.
Have not saints lips and holy palmers too? I, pilgrims' lips that they must use in prayer. These freaks. Sin from thy lips, O trespass sweetly urged. Give me my sin again.
No, this isn't how you guys wooed your wives.
Parting is such.
Sweet sorrow.
Hey, you guys got that one. But
Real
soft,
manna.
what?
Light from yonder window breaks. 'Tis the east.
Nope.
And
But soft, what light through yonder window breaks.
what did I say? Through from
From or is or yeah.
what light through yonder window
Is-
breaks? 'Tis the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and forsake the morning star. And if thou wilt not be but sworn, my love.
I defy you, stars.
Mm-hmm.
Women may fail when there's no.
Strength in men.
Nice. Oh, I am Fortune's.
What?
I am Fortune's fool.
Oh.
All right, Romeo and Juliet. They were good at style. Hey,
Shakespeare was good at style.
Yeah, well, they were too, I think. We are being ushered, though, into the haven of reflection upon deeper meaning.
Oh, didn't we already get this with the
I think we probably did. It tends to be that by the time we arrive at the haven, we've already found deeper meaning.
And we're ready to just go off into the gray havens. and
Maybe
into the
that's
west.
the real lesson is if by the time you reach the haven, you already have what you know.
And places between us.
Never let me go.
Yeah, never let me go. Oh man, what a sad book.
It took you too long to finally
Yeah, I
figure
know.
out
It's-
you missed the punchline.
Never let me go. I'll never let you go.
Frailty, thy name is
Turn
Brandon.
around.
I think Frailty, thy
Back
name is Brandon,
down,
saves about
brother.
every one of your
It's a good.
dives to
I
the board.
didn't
Yeah, it's,
promise to your mother.
The deeper meaning of this play is... What is the deeper meaning of Romeo and Juliet?
Don't give your love to someone who won't give it back. Value it. Oh,
Value it. Alright. I think we figured it out. Value my love, Nathan.
Value it. Value my love, Nathan.
value it.
okay. I think we have no deeper meaning for this book. Anything else you guys want to talk about Romeo and Juliet? Excuse me, before we call out our patrons.
No, let's call them out.
Okay, you
do it.
patrons. It's time.
How dare you?
How dare you?
I
Listen,
bite my thumb at you, sir.
Yeah.
I bite my thumb.
Brandon bites his
bite
tongue.
My tongue at all of you.
Yeah. All right.
Bite my tongue.
What's that a reference to? I bite my tongue.
Hocus pocus.
Hocus pocus. Where'd you get that? Hocus. All right, guys, let's shout out our patrons. How do you become a patron of the Bookening? Jake, why don't you say this in...
The small robot voice. You go to patreon.com/the Bookening. And wow, this is amazing. Bookening.com. Patreon.com. Okay. Patreon.com/the Bookening. There we can give you
A deep voice. And for your gift in any amount, you can be a patron. $10 a month. Yeah. All right.
That's enough of that. You go to patreon.com/the Bookening. You become a patron for any amount.
Yeah.
Any amount.
Any amount. $10 gets you a shout out. $5 gets you behind the scenes access.
$1 gets you nothing.
$1 gets you nothing, but it helps us.
$25 a month gets you our annual t-shirt. $50 a month gets you in the book club. And it is the coolest reward level because you get the donor shout out, all the behind the scenes content, the annual t-shirt, and you get a personalized copy of every book that we read here on the Bookening months in advance of our discussion of it so that you have plenty of time to read along with us. And we put all kinds of amazing, clever, insightful, and hilarious things.
Clever. They're very clever. They're hilarious.
In the books.
We
sign them.
It's one of our more popular tiers.
Why would you want a book signed by
the author?
Yeah, when it could be signed by us.
Especially since most of them are dead. That'd be
No,
creepy.
it'd be really weird.
You'd have to get a Ouija
A
board.
weird necromancy or something.
You don't want a Ouija board signing your copy of Romeo and Juliet.
You don't.
You want a human.
Yeah.
Preferably non-demonic humans.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say
Because
non-denominational.
you could go to that Doctor Who store and try to take their TARDIS and see the author.
You could.
You could.
You could.
You could.
I recommended against it. But I recommend for our patrons who we should shout out.
Shout them out.
Why don't you guys say which Shakespeare character these patrons resemble?
Okay.
Brandon, who do you think Robert and Rhonda the Lovebirds resemble?
Romeo and Juliet.
Of course. Jake, who do you think the artful Anthony Dodger and Bootstrap Betsy, his lovely wife, and I think their child now, resemble?
Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's true. A little Anthony cigar store.
Probably Dracula.
Yeah, that's my favorite Shakespeare character for sure. The Immortal Chelsea E.
Frankenstein.
Jimmy Beeman, Little Annie Oakley.
Dracula.
Lily of the Valley.
Frankenstein.
Andrew Nestor the Lovebirds.
Dracula.
Keith Master.
Frankenstein.
Folks, I'm going to throw a vocal effect on it just to make it interesting at least. We'll do pitch. Well, no, we'll do Monster. Of course, we should do Monster.
John and Jill, little baby Max, the Fire Lawrence. Jay and Katie, who are cold and love cheese, and also C.S. Lewis and Gilding too, where you have faces. Frankenstein. Fair Princess of Wonder and Happiness, Mother Beth. Constant Prime Adam. Frankenstein. Nathan Not Me. Dracula. Ryan the Red Avenger and Judith of the Ladies of Justice. Frankenstein. DJ Sammy G. Dracula. Indiana Tiberius. Frankenstein. Eric and Catherine from yonder to the right. Scylla. Professor Lady X. Frankenstein. Lavender screen Dylan. Lavender spoon. Lavender screen Dylan. I love you too. No constrictor. Magic. The fan favorite Raven Chloe. Frankenstein. Anthony was hate though. Cold Liberty. Cheese. Jiu-Jitsu Jeffrey the Texas Ranger. Frankenstein! Midnight Ninja Ellen. Return of the Jedi. Frankenstein! Dave Rack and Moon. Timothy the Writer and Dole. Frankenstein! Eric and Tate the Camp Cheese who are warm and love bees. Dracula. Man. Frankenstein! Sweet Jamie Sunshine. Dracula! Tyler, the Keeper of Eternal Darkness, and Laura, the Keeper of Eternal Light. Frankenstein! Cold Steel Cody. Dracula. Jacqueline Roy, Barbarian. Frankenstein. John Bummer, Lillibomb, Diggity, and Captain Tennille, his mate. Dracula. Saxophone Alex. Frankenstein. The other saxophone Alex, the dubstep Danny. Dracula. Ryan the Terror of Terrors is an actor for Creamy Crimson who are no longer stuck in the cold police and cheese. Frankenstein. Ben Solo and Colin Moran. Dracula. John the Cosmic King of Chaos. Dracula. Matthew, Frankenstein. Flair.
Annie, are you okay? Get your gun. Dracula. Flight of the Valerie. Frankenstein! Thor Ragnar Josh. Dracula!
Steven, ... Frankenstein. Pteranodon, Dracula. Christopher the Flower Hole, Frankenstein. Lady of the Crystal Lake, Dracula.
Ian the Dathomir and Lord of Death, Frankenstein. Emily H., Night Daughter of Dreams. Dracula. All About the Benjamin, Frankenstein. Mysterious Phantom, Dracula. Jeremy the Dark of the Lord of Death and his brooding bride, Maya. Frankenstein. Remains of the Jade, Dracula. Abram the Puller of Teeth, Frankenstein. Lawmore de Trenton, Dracula. Daniel, a man among men, and Jen, who strikes again every now and then. Frankenstein. That's good.